Here we have the Gridlock II from Innerclock, an Australian company that specialises in getting your hardware to work together with unbelievably precise timing. Here's a couple of their other products, the Syngen 3LX and the Multi-Split. But this is their latest offering, and it gives us a system that has a ridiculously low MIDI jitter of up to 20 microseconds. That's up to, in other words, a maximum of 20 millionths of a second, which is incredible in itself, but there's more because it also works with 5-pin DIN MIDI, USB, DIN sync and CV and gate. And that means you can connect all your vintage and your modern kit with rock solid timing. And it doesn't rely on your DAW's MIDI clock to do this. It creates its own MIDI clock using a little app that you get, a little plug-in that sends an audio signal that it creates MIDI clock from to give you that absolutely bang on timing. And on top of that, and probably more significant, is the custom driver and the active firmware that gives blisteringly fast MIDI event timing. Port-to-port skew on this is below 5 microseconds to all 44 output ports, with the CV and gate triggers below 50 nanoseconds, which is insane. If it went any faster, it'd be going back in time. And one of the big pluses, well, for me at least, is this. If we look here, we've got the Prodigy, Odyssey, Pro 1, Promars, Juno 60, all non-MIDI synths, but being accessed just like any standard MIDI kit if I come into the external MIDI instrument plugin or settings in Logic. And this is where you select your MIDI port, and here we go. Here's all the things I've got plugged in to the Gridlock II. So there's the Juno 60, Promars, Odyssey, Pro 1 and the Prodigy. So as I say, you just select it like any other bit of kit. I'll show all this working in a minute and how you do it. And I have to say, I've had a massive smile on my face ever since I've started using it and I've hooked all this gear up together. It's just been a technological marvel for me. And what I've got in the studio is around 40 years of buying synths. In fact, my first proper synth, my Juno 2, I bought used in 1986. So yeah, in a few weeks' time, it'll be the 40th anniversary of me buying my first synth. I'll have to do a little celebration on that. But about 15 or 16 years ago, in this room, I just felt too much stuff. It wasn't really working well together. Anyone that's got a lot of stuff knows that getting your MIDI timing right is a bit difficult, and the timing with your DAW and your hardware. Things were just getting a bit too complex, so I sold all that 90s stuff, all that typical 90s stuff you see, big Mackie 8-bus desk, a load of Roland rack units and Akai samplers, all that, all went, I thought I'll go totally in the box, and then that just wasn't as much fun. So bit by bit things started appearing. You can see more modern things behind me, but once I started doing that, again, the timing issues pop up. You know, how many MIDI outputs do you need? How do you put your MIDI throughs through different things? You know, why is the MIDI clock from the DAW not working well with the arpeggiator from this? All that sort of stuff just became a bit of a nightmare again. But using the synths for the YouTube demos as well, I take them in and out of the studio, so the whole thing just fell apart again. So recently I really have been looking for a way to get it all working together, so I don't have to worry about things like the MIDI timing, and being able to play things like my Odyssey, my Prodigy, my 909, my 606, all in time. Oh yeah, behind me I've got the Promars, I've got the CS15. I've not plugged that one in yet actually. There's an ARP Axe behind me, and I'm selling that, so I'm not plugging that one in. I'm waffling now, but really I'm just trying to describe all the different synths I've got in here and the problems that, as anyone with a lot of synths or drum machines will know, it just becomes a little bit of a timing nightmare. And, you know, accessing all these different synths, how do I plug the Prodigy in? Well, I've got a Kenton, a unit behind me up there on the shelf. I've got another TP Audio, I think it was called, unit. I've got my Midronome from Sim & Tonic from when doing stuff on the desktop. It's got a few MIDI connections, and that's quite rock solid, but it doesn't work for something the size of this. So luckily, recently, Innerclock have brought out Gridlock. And just to be completely transparent, I was sent this by Innerclock. They got in touch asking if I wouldn't mind taking a look just to give some feedback. And the feedback is basically, it's great. So I'll do a video on it because I think it's absolutely genius. So what is it? Well, it's a chunky desktop unit with a very utilitarian aesthetic. It looks like it's here to do a job. On the front, we've got 4 MIDI outputs, plus 2 USB-As and 2 USBs for hosts, and that's to sync things like other computers, or I think MPCs use that as well. Plus we've got 2 5-pin DIN MIDI inputs, and a couple of 5-pin DIN sync outs as well. On the back, we've got another 8 5-pin DIN MIDI outputs. That gives us 12 of those in total. Plus, we've got a couple of what look like old printer ports, and they connect to this, a CV gate breakout box, which I've got connected to those synths that you saw in Logic there, the Prodigy, the Odyssey, the Promars, and the Pro 1. Plus, we've got this stereo audio input, which is used to receive the audio signal from the Gridlock plugin, which is used to create the MIDI timing. And that's essential to understanding this system. You don't use the MIDI clock in your DAW. If you hadn't noticed already, it's just a little bit sloppy. If you take a look at this, I've got hi-hats here from my 909. The 909's playing its own pattern, but it's being clocked by the DAW on the top and by the Gridlock II on the bottom. And as we scroll across, we can see that the ones on the top go completely out of time. They'll drift back in again and they drift out again, but the timing isn't as precise as the one on the bottom, which is absolutely as tight as you can get with every single hit. And as I say, that's the pattern from the TR909 itself. I'm not programming the hi-hats on the DAW, and that means that you can use all your swing and all the sort of flams and everything else you get on your 909, but it keeps it absolutely bang on with everything else that you're playing. And that's important when you're using things like arpeggios or other drum machines, for example. It's nice to have occasionally the 909 being a bit sloppy in itself, but when you're playing it with other things, especially when you've got some fast arpeggios and the like, it really does make a big difference to have it absolutely on the beat. And if we listen to the Gridlock plugin, it's sending a stereo signal. So you send this stereo signal out of a set of outputs you're not using. I've got it here out of 7 and 8. And as the audio from your DAW is to all intents and purposes jitterless, by using this we get everything as precise as this can do, which is, as I say, less than 20 millionths of a second. This is where you organize everything, then you save it to the hardware itself. So the hardware can run completely standalone, which means it's really useful for complex stage setups where you need ultimate reliability and something really robust. And you can see on the left all the different synths I've got set up at the minute on it. And each of the synths has got its own output. So it gives me 12 5-pin transmits, so 8 on the rear of it and 4 on the front of it. We get 2 5-pin MIDI receives for maybe a control keyboard. We get DIN sync transmit. Well, I've been using that for the 606. We've got 2 of those over here. And you can use the MIDI outs for that as well. We've got the voltage. And as we've seen, I've got 4 synths using that. And then we've got USB as well. We've got 2 USB-As, and they're for MIDI receive or transmit. And on each of those are 4 different ports. So that's 8 USB MIDI synths in total. So that gives us 20 MIDI outputs and 8, 9, 10 MIDI inputs, including the 5 pins. Plus, of course, all your CV. That's 8 synths you could send gate and CV to. And if we take a look at this, this is from the audio MIDI setup in the Mac, and we can see here I've got how many there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 22 things connected up to it so far. The ones with receive and transmit are using the USB. That's the OB6, the Waldorf, the Polybrute OBX8, the Prophet 5, Mantis Take 5, and the Juno 60. Although the Juno 60 can't transmit, but I'm using this little gadget here to hook up the Juno 60 because it doesn't have MIDI, but it's got Roland's precursor to MIDI, which is the DCB, and that's why we've got this little LED light on the back of the Juno 60. And as soon as you create something in here, it will appear in your MIDI setup. So let's create something else. What have I got over there that I've not set up yet? I've got the Microwave XT. So if I click plus, then we'll add an instrument, MW XT. Okay, now we've got different options for the control type. Got 5-pin DIN transmit, 5-pin DIN receive, DIN sync, and you can notice that the DIN sync could be these ones over here or these ones over here. So any of the 5-pin MIDIs can be used for DIN sync as well. Voltage transmit and USB transmit or receive, and then USB 3 to 4 transmit as well. And these two USB connections can be connected with a 4-port MIDI hub, which is where you get the 4 outputs from each of them. So on USB 1, I've got a 4-port MIDI hub. On USB 2, I've also got a 4-port MIDI hub. But the Microwave XT takes 5-pin MIDI. So click on that, and we're going to use MIDI transmit 6. If we come down to the bottom, it's created the connection down here. And the mode is as MIDI. It could be DIN sync, as I said. All the MIDI transmits could be MIDI DIN sync as well, but mainly I'd have thought anyone will use those as MIDI. And then we've got some additional controls that I'll go into a bit later. So now all there is to do is to click save. Once I click save, it'll save it to the hardware. So there we go, save to the hardware. So to use this setup that we've created here, we don't need this control app. It's on the hardware itself, completely standalone. And now if we come in here, I've got my Microwave XT over here on the right. If we come back in here then, let's create a new track. Let's have it as external MIDI, and let's have it as, where are we? Microwave XT. Put it on all, doesn't really matter. Create. Now I've not actually got the Microwave XT hooked up at the minute because I need to pull out my whole rack. But if it was, there it is. And then we've got a few more configuration settings down here. And possibly the most important ones are these MIDI clock and transport functions. So transport on and off. And as you know, this is all controlled via the Gridlock II plugin, which we just set up in the DAW. So if we want to send timing clock, we send at different clock rates for PPQN. And we can shift the clock. We've got a rhythmic shift there, so we can shift it by 16ths. We've got PPQN at 96, and we've also got hundredths of milliseconds, which is 100,000th of a second. So we've got pretty accurate clock shift in there. If we go to DIN sync, we've got slightly different settings. I'll put that back on MIDI because that's what I want on it. And then if we look at something like the Juno 60, as I say, this is using the MIDI receive and transmit ports 1 and 2 using USB 2. And here it is on port 4. So in each of these, I have a USB hub, a 4-port USB hub, and that's how we get the 4 ports on each of them, 8 ports in total. I'm using 2. The first was this one that I just had lying around in a drawer, and it works just fine. I did try an 8-port, but the port allocation was weird because often, even though they say the 6 or 8 ports, in reality, they're 4 ports with a bit of internal trickery. So you're best sticking with a 4-port if you can. And because the temperamental, I did ask for recommendations and they suggested this one. It was just £21 on Amazon, so it's nothing special. And I think they may be bringing out an Innerclock version to make sure that there's one they know works flawlessly. So keep an eye out for that. Coming back into that Logic program then, just to show you once more. So it's a Prodigy, Odyssey, Pro 1, Promars, and the Juno 60. And it's hard to describe how responsive this feels, but you can really feel it's super quick. And that's the less than 50 nanosecond CV and gate response time I mentioned in the intro. Just feels really tight. You just select them like anything else from a MIDI interface or with USB MIDI. But what's nice about this is that you've actually named them all. So it feels a little bit more like using something like the Circlon. And if the Microwave XT was actually MIDI'd up, we could select that too. Let's just come back to Gridlock 2 for a second and look at some of the bits we've got in here. So let's go to something that I've got on USB. Doesn't have to be USB, it could be MIDI this, but just wanted to show you that we've got filters in here as well, so you can filter various MIDI messages. So control filters, system filters, and channel filters, so you can filter out program changes or control changes or pressure, you know, whatever you want really. Say whatever you want, whatever's in here. These are individual CCs. And we got different settings for transmit filters and for receive filters. So it's really comprehensive as a MIDI hub as well. And let's take a quick look at the settings we get for the voltage expander. Go to the voltage ones. Let's go to the Prodigy, for example. So Prodigy, slot 1 is set to be the gate and slot 2 is set to be the CV. And again, we've got loads of control over everything in here. And a really handy one here is the pitch offsets and scales. If your synth's not quite working as it should, you can accommodate for that within here, especially the scale. That's really handy. So if your octave's not quite an octave, you can make it more or less. And you can offset in semitones and cents. So if you're really out, you can really tune your synth through this, which is really handy as well. You've got volts per octave and you've got hertz per octave. And from the gate perspective, you've got V trig, you've got S trig, and you've got different voltages. So I'm using 12 volts on the Promars, 5 volts on everything else. And if, like me, you change what's in the studio, or you've got different live setups, well, you can just create completely separate sessions for that. So create a new session, default session 2, okay, open. So it's applying these settings now to the hardware, so it's getting rid of everything that's in there, but not to worry, you can just load it back again. And here we have it, a clean session. So instrument 1, Minimoog, just showing you really how simple it is to do. Minimoog, and that's going through 5-pin DIN, so transmit, we'll have that through number 1 there. Ports enabled, yeah, that's fine. Let's add another, the Voyager. Okay, that's through transmit 2, done. Okay, let's show you the OBX8. So that's by USB, and I think that's on, I have set this up on 4, I think. Easy enough to check though. And this is it, this is how simple it is. Let's do the Odyssey. That's voltage, and I've got that on 15 and 16. So 15 is the gate, 16, we'll have that as CV. So CV and gate. And you can delete these and add them if you want to add one for controlling the cutoff, for example. I do have a CV input for the filter on the Prodigy. So the Prodigy, I've got it on 1 is the gate, 2 is the CV, and 3, we'll have that as control voltage as well. Down here, amplitude range, 5 volts. And you can set the offset on this as well, just in case it's all a bit wonky. Another one that's slightly interesting is the Promars. Because as I said, that has got, let's put that on 9 and 10. 9 is gate, 10 is CV, but the gate doesn't register with anything under 10 volts. So you'll put that on 12 volts for the Promars. And that's it. Hit save and you're done. I think I've demoed everything major I wanted to show. I wanted to show the super tight timing, the fact that the MIDI timing comes through itself, not from your DAW. Using it with MIDI synths, with USB, with CV and gate, with DIN sync. And for all that, for me, it's worked absolutely flawlessly. It's like worked perfectly. I'm really, really pleased with it. But it does have its limitations, according to the manufacturer. If you're using something like a MIDI controller, firing loads and loads of SysX round, like I use those retroactive controllers for some of my older synths, that don't have an interface like the Alpha Juno 2, for example. So those sort of interfaces tend to get a little bit clogged up at the minute. The MIDI timing won't be as tight as you'd want. They had hoped to have that sorted for release, but apparently it's going to be in a later update. It's not really an issue for me because that's not the sort of thing I'm doing live when everything's playing. That's me setting up the tones normally, but just to be aware of that. And the other thing that's worth noting is that it is definitely a pro piece. Looking at their website, it's at £2,200. So we have definitely left Behringer budget territory here. We're an order of magnitude higher. So it is definitely designed for the sort of people that would invest in £2,000 in a Cyclone to get the MIDI timing as tight as possible. And for people that need something that's reliable and robust for a live situation where you've got a lot of things that you want controlling and you don't want to rely on a computer or some other, or lots of different interfaces to do the same task. I've been using, as I said in the intro, I've been using this, the Kenton Pro Solo Mark II, and you can adjust the tuning scale on this for your CV instruments. I've also been using this, it's the TA programming, and you've got 4 output ports on there, so we can use that for 2 synths. So with the Pro Solo and the TA programming together allow me to control 3 synths, but of course I'm using 2 different MIDI outputs to do that. And then when I've needed really tight timing, I've been using the metronome. And this is great for doing stuff on a tabletop. It's really tight timing. It's got USB analog clock. It's got MIDI clock. You can sync it up to Ableton. So it's a lovely little bit of kit. But no matter how good this is, it's still another box and it doesn't do everything that the Gridlock does. So you need this and my other 2 MIDI to CV converters and another couple of Kenton Pro Solos or one of the double ones. So that'd be another 200, 250 pounds. So all in all, you come into 600, 700, 800 pounds for the 4 little boxes and you still don't get what you've got in the Gridlock II. So you'd still need a large MIDI interface. So it starts to bring the £2,200 into looking like a reasonable cost for something that does all that in a single box. But yeah, it's not going to be for everyone. But if you've got an eclectic bunch of synths and drum machines like I have, it's an absolute no-brainer, to be honest. And if you've got an even larger setup, you can even design a rack unit to hold 2 of them. So there you have it then, an all-in-one MIDI CV, DIN sync, USB converter, MIDI timing module. It's honestly, I know I've said it a few times now, but I'm really stunned by quite how good it is now. It's brought everything together. So I know it's not going to be for everyone, but for anyone that it was, I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that if you did enjoy it, maybe you'll join me over on Patreon. I've got tutorials, patches, samples, various things to download up there, and I upload things on a regular basis. Also, do take a look at my starskycar.com website, where again, I've got patches, samples, stuff you can buy, and free little bits and bobs as well. It's always nice, as I say, if you pick up some of the cheaper bits, because obviously it all does help to support the channel, as does buying things through affiliate links and all the rest of it. But most of all, hope you enjoyed that, and thanks for staying to the very end.